piano friends! Today we're talking about how to teach Bourée in E minor by Graupner. It sounds like this. This is a fun, exciting, early intermediate Baroque piece that a lot of students play because it can be found in the Piano Adventures curriculum that's in lesson book 4. If you have taught out of the Piano Adventures curriculum, I'm guessing that you have taught this piece. It's inserted at a point where the Fabers are going over G major and E minor key signature and the relative relationship between those two keys. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. I enjoy sharing information about particularly intermediate repertoire here on my channel, but I have many more resources if you jump down and click the link in the description of this video. So at this point in many method books, such as Piano Adventures, the authors begin to include historical repertoire, things from the Baroque period or the classical period, at points where it lines up with the sequencing of concepts or topics that they want to introduce to a student. So like I said, this is placed in the unit about G major and E minor. And I love that modern methods do this. They mix up their own, current day compositions along with repertoire from past time periods. Some teachers have the question of how long should I stay in a method book? Should I stay all the way through, or should I jump ship in the middle? Do I need to provide my own historical repertoire, supplemental literature alongside? And those are really things that you get to decide as a teacher yourself. But I do have a brand new resource all about method books and intermediate repertoire series. So again, look in the description of this video for more information and help on that topic. So fun fact about Christoph Graupner, he was from the same area as Bach, and he actually was a direct contemporary. He was born 2 years before Bach was. And when Bach applied for the position in Leipzig that he eventually took and spent many of his years of his career working, Graupner was the second choice for that job after Telemann. And when he was unable to take it, Bach was the third choice. And I'm just laughing at the idea of Johann Sebastian Bach being the third choice on anybody's hiring list, but there you have it. That's a fun fact from history. So this piece, like I said, is in E minor. Our students should be practicing E minor scales and chords when they're learning pieces like this. And if you're following this method, then you would be having your students practice those things. They have a scale workout a few pages previously, along with chord inversions to practice. And my students, while we may not use the exact exercises in a method book, if they're using this curriculum, we are definitely playing scales, chord progressions, chord inversions, and arpeggios. And all of that is going to help them be very ready to play something like this, to understand the key that they're in, to see the patterns that are going around. Now that said, this piece is tricky, not because of the length, not because of the rhythm, not even really because of the technique. This piece is tricky because it is in that contrapuntal style or independent line style, which was the style of the time in the Baroque period. So we primarily have two lines. We have this melodic line on the top, and then the bass line on the bottom. But there are additional notes thrown in at various points. So the left hand at the beginning has an additional B to make a fifth, and then a fourth, and then a third. And then that line kind of drops out for a little bit, and you just get one E in the right hand in measure 4. If you look in measure 9, 10, 11, 12, though, we have a little bit more in that alto voice, if you want to call it. Measure 10, the right hand has a G, and then 11, A, G, B. So you could think of those notes as additional harmonic support that they are, filling in the chord. So for instance, the downbeat in measure 1, we just have an open position E minor triad. The G has been taken out from down there and placed on top. Or you could think of that as its own little line. So Students at this point have not experienced anything with three voices, right? We're not thinking about fugues or three-part inventions at this point, and certainly this piece is much easier than an invention or anything else that's, at that solid intermediate to upper intermediate contrapuntal style. But that is what makes this difficult. And students frequently mess up, in my experience at least, those alto notes in the right-hand part. Part of it is just that it's getting to the D sharp. So in measure 7, if you're going to use the fingering that's put in there in the book, that means you're putting your thumb on the D sharp, which is just awkward. And one little quick technique tip, students do need to be encouraged to play close to the fall board. I have many students who just really like to sit way out here at the end of the white keys, but that's impossible if you're going to play many black keys, and it's actually not in alignment with the natural shape of our hand. If we're going to play, that E minor 5-finger pattern with your 2 on F sharp, then that means that your 3 and your 4 are naturally, because of the length of those fingers, they're naturally going to be right there in between the F sharp and G sharp, or the G sharp and A sharp. So they're in that gray zone that I like to call it. So we just have to encourage them, if you're going to use that fingering, to get in towards the fall board, to get that thumb up on the D sharp. You can't play it and have your hand all the way out here on the tip of the white keys. Similarly, in the third line, they do need to hold those bottom notes of the right hand part as half notes or dotted half notes. That G should sound through there. The A should continue into that second beat. And similarly, the G should continue into that fourth beat. And then going on from there, we have this last little chord with 3 notes. So measure 15 and 16. Again, that's one of the reasons we practice chord inversions, is to see that E minor chord right there. So while you're dealing with those extra little alto notes, of course, your left hand is also moving around. This is not a super active left hand, but it does not stay in E minor position. It does bounce around. Getting down to that D sharp. That is what I like to call the minuet pattern, because every minuet that I know, or almost every minuet that I know, uses that octave with the 5th inside, descending. The very famous G major minuet has that in it on G. So we learned the minuet pattern earlier than this piece, and then when we see it there, we say, oh, that's just the minuet pattern going down from E. So you're welcome to use that little name for it as well. I do have a video on a Mozart minuet that has the minuet pattern, so if you click right up there, you can find that video for more help teaching minuets. Now back to our bourrée, which is not a minuet, it's in duple time. We still have that minuet pattern with a rest. So as far as articulation goes, in general, everything in the Baroque, particularly anything that's a dance, a bourrée was one of the types of French court dance, it should all have this lovely lilt and a bit of lift to it. We in the 21st century live with what I call post-romantic ears. We live past the 19th century, and we're used to things being in a default of legato. But at this time, that was not the default. The default would have been more detached and lifted up. So the Fabers have done a really nice job in this edition, I think, of marking articulation that I think brings out the Baroque style. Graupner would not have written that articulation. Those slurs and staccatos are added by them. But just to say that the staccatos in this style do not need to be super short and poppy. It should be more of a detached feel. And I do like those 2-note slurs for a little bit of variety and emphasis on the main beats. This is in binary form, which is another great teaching point for a piece like this. Binary form is A with a repeat and B with a repeat, and we find so many early intermediate pieces like this that just take up 1 page on a piece of paper. They might have 8 measures for that A section repeated, and then 8 measures for the B section, again, repeated. It's very easy form to see visually because of the repeats. This happens, of course, in the classical era too, with Beethoven German dances, Haydn dances. Those kinds of pieces all have that binary form as well. And one thing that the editors, again, have marked in here is that it's fun to do an echo dynamic, playing the A section first at a forte dynamic and then repeating it at a piano dynamic. I think that works really well, but that's editorial, so you actually have freedom to change these dynamics. You could do a similar thing of playing measures 1 through 4, forte, and then coming down for measure 5, piano, maybe with a little crescendo to the end of measure 8. That's a bit of what happens in the B section here, so that's another option for what to do there. But some form of echo dynamics or contrast on the repeated material makes this much more interesting than if you just play it all at one dynamic. The problem spot for this piece is that the right hand in measures 3 and 4, 7 and 8, and 15 and 16, the ends of those lines, is similar but not the same. And if you've ever tried to learn anything or memorize pieces on the piano, you know that our brains do fine with things that are exactly the same or things that are really different, but our brains have a hard time processing things that are sort of the same but actually different. So right hand measure 3 and 4, 7 and 8, and then 15 and 16 doesn't start on B, it starts on the G. I would probably in the first lesson go through those 3 things. Let's just practice right hand in those 3 measures. And the left hand is exactly the same for the first 2, but different in measure 15. So I would also go through that. And if your student is going to memorize this and play it for any kind of performance, then you need to make sure they really understand those 3. And you could even quiz them. Okay, play the ending of the first line. Play the ending of the last line. Do they have it very clear in their brain? And are they not just relying on fingers? If they're just relying on muscle memory for this, it's so easy to flip those around and then become confused in the performance as to where you actually are, even in a very short piece like this. All right, I hope that gives you some help in teaching this historical piece from the Piano Adventures curriculum. If you have other pieces that are found in method books, but that are historical repertoire, I'd love to know if you have questions about them. And what are your favorite pieces to teach that are at this early intermediate level that you might find in a series such as Piano Adventures? I'd love to know. I wish you all the best in your teaching and playing.